I am Carly Israel, recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is January 27th, 1999. And I remember hating myself so much that I would never even chosen that title to read out loud in a sentence. Because the secret is, if you're a real alcoholic and you don't do the work meaning the steps, then for me, you cannot stay sober. But that's just like the entryway to getting to a place where you're even capable of looking at this topic. You cannot get to loving yourself before you go through the steps. So the steps only talk about drinking in step 1, right? The rest of the steps are getting rid of that mental obsession, that mean, angry voice in our head.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast. My name is Michael Lynn from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And I'm Lee McGinnis from Leesburg, Virginia.
As members of the recovery community, we created this podcast as a way to provide experience, strength, and hope through the lens of the Daily Reflection book. Each day, we interview members of the recovery community in the hope that their experience may provide inspiration.
We value inclusion and diversity, and we really want to provide a platform for all the voices of recovery. We aren't affiliated with any 12-step or recovery program, but you may hear these mentioned throughout the course of an interview.
Hey, before we get to the show, I'd like to ask a favor. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it'd be great if you could leave us a comment or a rating. This is going to do a couple of things. It's going to help us expand our reach and improve the show.
We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thanks so much to Jeff Boehm of Frederick, Maryland, for editing services and helping us get these episodes out the door. Thank you, Jeff. Hey, what's going on today?
I am very excited this morning. So we have with us in the studio our new friend, Carly Israel. She's from Cleveland, Ohio, and she runs an amazing podcast that I've been listening to for a couple of years, and it's just been such a boost to my sobriety. It's called the North Star Big Book Podcast, and she's here with us today to share her experience, strength, and hope around today's daily reflection, learning to love ourselves.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Carly, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on the podcast.
I am thrilled to be here.
Well, would you introduce yourself to the audience? You want to let folks know a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I am Carly Israel, recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is January 27th, 1999. I have a podcast called North Star Big Book, and my home group is called North Star Big Book on Thursdays, 7 p.m. Eastern. All are welcome, always virtual, and we break down the big book. So I love having everyone on there with their little faces all smiley.
Fantastic. Well, we'll include links in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, make sure you check the show notes for links. And well, that brings us to the beginning of the show. We start the show in the same way every day. We ask the guest if they would read the daily reflection for today, April 24th. Carly, would you get us started?
It would be my honor. Learning to love ourselves. Alcoholism was a lonely business. Even though we were surrounded by people who loved us, we were trying to find emotional security either by dominating or by being dependent upon others. We still vainly tried to be secure by some unhealthy sort of domination or dependence. As Bill sees it, page 252. When I did my personal inventory, I found that I had unhealthy relationships with most people in my life. My friends and family, for example. I always felt isolated and lonely. I drank to dull emotional pain. It was through staying sober, having a good sponsor, and working the 12 steps that I was able to build up my low self-esteem. First, the 12 steps taught me to become my own best friend. And then, when I was able to love myself, I could reach out and love others.
That's beautiful and truly one of the promises of recovery, you know? So how does this resonate with you as you read it? What comes to mind first?
What comes to mind first is a 19-year-old, almost dead, full-blown, late-stage alcoholic that I was when I fell into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember hating myself so much that I would never even chosen that title to read out loud in a sentence, because I hated myself more than anyone else on earth could hate me. And I was also obsessed with staring at myself in the mirror because what I saw was so different than what I felt on the inside. Can you guys relate to that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%.
And I know that through the 12 steps, that was the only way I could get to a place where I had a chance. And then this almost became like the next frontier, like they talk about, like the old timers talked about, this emotional sobriety, this emotional maturity and emotional security. Because what I found when I put down the booze and the drugs was I needed to use anything else that was around me to give myself worth. Ultimately, if you stay sober long enough, nothing else works except for God, the steps, and getting to a place where you can love yourself.
How long did it take you to kind of turn that corner and begin to see that it might be possible to love yourself?
Such a great question. So the first part of my sobriety, when I first got sober, I did nothing other than go to meetings and not drink, because that's what I heard. Don't drink and go to meetings. And I also heard people talking about work, but I totally ignored them because, like, why would I do work if I don't have to? That didn't work. I chased guys in AA. I got a bunch of tattoos. I compulsively ate or exercised or smoked. I did anything I could that was allowed in sobriety, but I just abused it. And then I started working the steps when I was about 9 months sober, because I almost killed myself in the rooms. Because the secret is, if you're a real alcoholic and you don't do the work meaning the steps, then for me, you cannot stay sober. But that's just like the entryway to getting to a place where you're even capable of looking at this topic. And when I was about 4 years, no, let me back up. When I was 2 years sober, I went on a solo trip. And I think I was like kind of born in the wrong era. I always connected with all those, old timers of the road trips and going away to find yourself. And I did that. I went on a trip by myself with God. And it was a crazy trip to Israel. And it was timed perfectly with the Sbarro bombings, when Israel closed its doors to American travelers. And I was en route. And all these signs came my way, and I was stuck in another country. I was in France because I didn't know where else to go, and no one knew where I was. There were no cell phones, and it was me and God in my brain. And my brain was not nice, because just because you're doing the steps and staying sober doesn't mean you get to a place where you love yourself unless you intentionally work on it. And what I found out, because I'd always been drowning out that mean message that we hear in our brain with whatever I was allowed to do sober, when I found out by myself alone on this journey, was that the message is a loop. Like back in the day when there were cassette tapes and it would just like re-loop. And I like caught it. I was like, wait, this is the same thing you said earlier to me. I just never gave myself a long enough time to listen to the voice. And I made this decision on the floor of my hotel room in Nice, where I realized I never made amends to myself. I know that's controversial. Some people are like, oh, you're not allowed to make amends to yourself. I am a big book student, and I've never seen anywhere in the book that says you are not allowed to make amends to yourself. It tells us we're supposed to make amends to people we've harmed. And there was no one I harmed more than my parents, but next to that was myself. And I sat in front of that mirror for about 2 hours, and out loud, I cried and I laughed, and I had the best conversation of my life with myself. And I said to myself, I'm not going to be mean to you anymore. I'm going to have your back, because what I found in that inventory, like they talk about in the reading, was that I was the problem in all of my life. And if I couldn't have my back, I was never going to make it here. And so that began the journey of it. Have you guys ever made amends to yourself?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I remember hearing in a meeting that how selfish it is to make amends to yourself, and it didn't resonate then. And at one point, I actually reached out to another woman who was older as a mentor. She wasn't really my sponsor, and she said, let's make a list of all of the things you did to abuse yourself. Let's make a list of all of the things all the positions you put yourself in. Like, it's a miracle you're even alive in the positions you put yourself in. Like, I would never let my child or any friend do the things that I allowed myself to do. So I really love what you're saying. And I think part of recovery for me anyway, and I know for the women I sponsor, is getting to know yourself, because we detach from ourselves because we're so busy trying to either detach with drugs and alcohol or please everybody else. So the last person in the world we have any connection with is ourselves. And I think recovery is such a beautiful process for connecting back to yourself. And so I guess my question to you now is, besides that beautiful moment, a spiritual experience in your hotel room in Nice, what are the ways that you've connected to yourself? What are the ways that you've built that relationship and made it strong?
So first of all, thank you for sharing that. I love the questions you posed about what positions did we put ourselves in? What relationships did we accept when we knew, when that voice in our inside of us, that soul voice, that God voice was like, this is bad, right? What things did I not speak up for? What things did I allow to happen? What things did I do to myself? It's really interesting because through this journey of sobriety, and I'll get back to that question, but through this journey of sobriety and doing the work every single day, no matter what, and falling down and getting up and falling down and getting up and learning and making mistakes, I've gotten to a place where I was able to write my memoir, which was called Seconds and Inches from Sobriety, that idea that we've survived by seconds and inches. And in it, I shared all the beautiful and ugly, right? And along the way, I've been doing interviews with people all over the world talking about the stories that are in there. And what comes up a lot from every listener and everyone that sends me private messages is the real story of my book. And only one person caught it when immediately was it's a love story. And I didn't even know it. I wrote it and I didn't know it. And the interviewer said, this is a love story. And I said, tell me who it's a love story with. And he said, it's with yourself. Because I came to the beginning carrying so much stuff from my family, from my past, from all the things that we put ourselves through. And then I take the reader through the journey of all of the mess. And then at the end of it is letters. So the whole book has got letters to people in my life that changed my life. And at the end of it, there's a letter to God and there's a letter to Carly. And it is a story because I was searching for my whole life. In the beginning, I didn't have my family to help me because my parents were alcoholics in my childhood. And then through every relationship I put myself in, I always chose people that were never going to be there for me. And so what I found out through this journey, through writing, like you asked what I do tons of writing. I do tons of inventory work. I meditate every single day. I follow the dictates of 10, 11, and 12. I work with other alcoholics, so I have to constantly go back to that miserable pain that they're in. And through this journey and outside spiritual stuff that I do to challenge myself, I found that I found the person that will always have my back. I found my soulmate, and it's myself. And I don't think that's corny. I think that's empowering. And so from that, I decided to create a movement because why not? I was told in the rooms that you are not supposed to only stay here to stay on the folding chairs in the basements. You're supposed to go out and live life and blaze trails and light the way for other people so they can see that sobriety isn't just about being sober. It's about dreaming. And so I started a movement called Must Love Self. And it's going to be a new podcast. It's going to be a whole journey of challenging mostly women right now to say, we're sick of talking about our bodies. We're sick of not having worth, and we're sick of not using our voices. And it's all from the foundation of the steps.
So powerful. I love it. I can't wait to see that come together.
And I want you on it.
I'll be on it.
Good.
I think the most powerful component of what we're talking about here is that like we need to go no further than self to begin to build a foundation of strong recovery.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's about me and God, right? So the real relationship started with God. I was not able to love myself before I was able to connect with God. The journey that they talk about in the reading that we just did, for me, it was a little backwards. I always have used writing. Everyone's got different tools that they use to find their connection. I've kept a journal since I got sober. And I would sit in meetings because I had such bad undiagnosed ADD. And I would write in my journal what the leads were saying or different messages I was hearing. Because if I didn't write it down, I couldn't hear it. And I'd be like focusing on everybody else. And I sat in the front row because I didn't want to see everybody that was, walking around. So I've been writing messages between me and God for 22 years. And from that experience, I found my voice and I found God's voice, and I can determine which is which. Do you guys know how to determine which is which?
Oh, no, please tell me.
Okay, so this is not mine, and nothing's mine. I always steal something from someone else. So this speaker I heard, there was a group of women, and she said, by show of hands, how many of you hear two voices in your head? And half the room raised their hand. Do you guys hear voices in your head? And then she said, for those who didn't raise your hand, did you hear a voice that says, I don't hear voices in my head? And then everyone laughed. And she basically said it like this, and I'll explain it the way that we can understand it, that we have basically, for us, our mental obsession voice, right, that is out to get us or wants something right now and is very selfish. And we have our God soul voice. And the way you can actually tell the difference. And some of my sponsees, I tell them to text to themselves back and forth, and they can see which voice is talking or write it down. So let's say, for example, that Mike wanted to wake up at 6 a.m. every morning to exercise and meditate. And your alarm goes off, right? Our alarm goes off. It's so cold and dark. And our first thought is, I'm so tired. I want to go to sleep. And then we hear a voice that says, you said you were going to wake up and work out and meditate. And then that other voice goes, you'll do it later. And the voice goes, you know you're not going to do it later. You're going to be tired. And it goes back and forth. The difference between the voices is two things. The mental obsession voice, or the me voice, wants right now satisfaction, comfort. It will settle for putting off anything that's going to grow us, and we're going to choose right now. So I'm going to eat this. I'm going to text that person. I'm going to look this up on Facebook. I'm going to sleep. The other voice, the God voice, wants what's best for us in the future. It wants us to grow. And I often hear, it's not all the time, but the me mental obsession voice says I, and the other voice says you. It says, you said you were going to do this. And for me, my God voice is not mean, and it's not loud, and it's not insistent. It just is there telling me, kind of like a good sponsor, you said you were going to do this. But then we get to choose, right? Do you guys relate to that conversation in your head?
Absolutely. Yeah.
100%. And it's interesting because to me, I think my voice is in my head and God's voice feels like it's in my heart.
That 100% makes sense. 100%.
Mm-hmm. So I love the part about writing, because writing is one of my tools, and I've been journaling. I've been sober for 9 years and been journaling for probably 3. And I do this thing where I throw up all over the page all my stuff, my 10 step, basically.
Yeah.
It's a morning written 10 step. And
Yep.
then God writes back.
Yes.
It has changed my relationship with my higher power and myself, and it's just been the most beautiful thing. And it was at the suggestion of my sponsor when I was beating myself up, and she said, would you talk to your child like that?
Absolutely. And
What
it's
do you
really
think
about
God would say to
changing our
you?
language, right? It's about changing our
Yeah.
language. But I do the same thing as you, Lee. I actually write, like, I'm writing to God in my journal, and sometimes God will write, Carly, you know this is not, and so I listen. And we were told when we got sober and we did the work that if you do this work in 10, 11, and 12, it specifically talks about it in 11, that you will intuitively know what to do. And that when you don't know what to do, it tells us to pause and to wait and to ask. There's never been a time where I haven't known what to do. The problem is, if we don't love ourselves enough, we don't have the worth, and we're not comfortable with who we are and letting go of what everyone else thinks, then we will second guess that voice and we will confuse it. I have a super easy way to figure out if your voice that you're hearing is God's voice or not. Do you want to know it?
Let's hear it.
Okay. So if you think the plan that God has in store for you is really God, the quick test is, are you willing to share it with your sponsor? If you're not willing to share what you think God's trying to tell you with your sponsor, it's most likely not from God.
Wow.
That is a great, quick, easy, doable, actionable test. I want to hear you finish your thought, and then I have a question.
Okay, so I've been carrying around this little teeny pamphlet called Emotional Maturity for my whole sobriety. This is probably my second version of it. And we're going to do a checklist together, and we're all three of us are going to answer where we are today, not a long time ago.
Uh-oh. I'm kind of worried, but let's do it.
It's okay. So on the front of it says, my mind is my garden, my thoughts are my seeds. I will harvest either flowers or weeds. So here are suggested characteristics of a mature person. Accepts criticism gratefully, being honestly glad for an opportunity to improve.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
Me too.
It depends on how it's phrased, to be honest. Constructive, loving criticism, 100%.
Right. It doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy it, but I actually do want to know when I'm not doing something well. Like, I'm not uncomfortable with that. Does not indulge in self-pity, has begun to feel the law of compensation operating in all life. That one I'm solid in. I think because
I feel good there.
You guys gave me this perspective that when I do get in self-pity, I can do a 10-step and come back to, like what Mike was saying earlier, like, I'm so grateful for my problems.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so today's a weird day, kind of having some physical issues, and I kind of drifted into self-pity this morning, but I feel like the program's pulling me out. So,
and here's the thing, Mike, we're human. We're going to go to those places, but we have tools to pull us out of them.
Right on. Yeah.
And Mike, you did that. We were discussing our day and how this was going to unfold, and he was in a little bit of self-pity, and then he literally caught himself and sent me the next text, said, I'm done with self-pity. This is going to be a great day. So I think we're allowed to do that. Yeah.
We are. I mean, my sponsor and I both have medical issues chronically, and we both send basically the same 10-step to each other all the time. But at the end of it, it pulls us out. We're human. We're not going to not have human feelings, but we have tools. Okay, next one. Does not expect special consideration from anyone. In my beginning, I expected special consideration from everyone. I'm definitely at that place today.
I feel
Yeah,
solid
agree.
there.
Yeah, definitely.
Controls their temper.
Oh, I
For
feel
sure.
100% different from early sobriety. Absolutely.
I control my temper with everyone on earth except for my husband. And we are a perfect match for each other. So we both are willing to call each other out. And nobody on earth makes me lose my my mind other than him. And so I'm really working hard on not arguing with him. So that's my one area.
I love the
I
honesty.
think too, yeah, the honesty is great. And I also think that in those relationships that are closest to us, it's an opportunity for us to grow through our old stuff. So they're going to trigger us. The people that we love the most are going to push those buttons. But again, are you in a space with somebody that's going to hang in with you as you work through it? And can you do a 10 step? Can you move through? I think again, human,
So
right?
guess what? There's a part in, I feel like it's in A Family Afterward, or maybe to wives, it's probably to wives, where they give this suggestion of what to do when you're with your partner and you're arguing. And it's basically like, this is getting serious. Let's take a break. I love you. And I remember reading that for years and being like, that's never going to happen. However, I've been doing the 10 step every single day throughout the day when stuff comes up since I was 13 years sober. So almost 10 years. I have now 4 times in the middle of a fight with my husband gone like that. I put a T, like timeout. I've already taught him how to do a 10 step because I cannot have a relationship with someone that cannot inventory. And I go, I need to go do a 10 step. Not one of those 4 times has he been like, I love the way you're talking to me. Let's continue. He's always been like, please go take care of your stuff. And that actually really can happen.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
So we've gotten on this journey and we're going through the emotional security. Is there anything else left in that?
Yes. I'm not going to read them all because there's so many, but I'm going to read a couple. Does not worry unduly about things they cannot help. I'm not so great at this one. This one's harder for me. I usually start in fear and then I do an inventory to remind myself I can't do anything about it. What about you guys?
I think in most areas of life, I'm feeling pretty good about that. I have a son who may potentially be one of us, and I have to work hard. I'm in an Al-Anon program for that. And then financial insecurity still kind of plagues me every now and then. Not gonna lie, but I can pray, turn it over, do the next best thing. What about you, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, they call them character defects. I call them defaults. So I know I'm always going to have them available to me, and fear is definitely one of them. So, the great thing is, like we're talking about, we have a program that helps us deal with them. And, that 10 step is so powerful when you weave it into your life because I, at worst case, get to nighttime and then I address those things. So, yeah,
I love this, guys. You guys are awesome. I'm so excited to have connected with you.
This
right
is
on.
amazing.
Yeah, likewise.
We need to do more of this. Can you come tomorrow?
Right.
So I did have a question for you because we do have a lot of people that listen to the podcast that are either brand new or maybe they're listening. I mean, one of the beauties of having a podcast, as you know, Carly, is we reach people that may not have even found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous yet. So, what do you tell the newcomer or the person who's sort of feeling their way around whether they even have an issue, how to begin this process of self-love?
Well, two things. You just opened up the magic door. So I have to open up my magic door, which is my big book. And I'm going to go to 44. And I want you to know the reason why I'm going here is first for the person who doesn't know if they belong here, because I've been in so many meetings where I've heard people say, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic or not, or if whatever my thing is. I'm just here because, you guys said I could be here. And to be clear, everyone's welcome in any recovery program if they want to be there. But I think it's really, really important to know what I am. And so I have a 1 sentence question out of the big book that I always take people to help them determine, because it's my responsibility. So it's on page 44 in We Agnostics, and it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot drink, you cannot quit entirely. So you really don't want to drink anymore, or whatever it is you're doing, and you want to stop. So you moderate or stop, and you make that decision, but you can't stay stopped. The reason why we can't stay stopped has nothing to do with alcohol. It's the mental obsession. So it's our brain telling us a lie. We can pick it up. We can have a little. No one will know, right? So that's one option. And the book has as a word in the middle of the sentence. The word is or. So I don't have to be both of them. or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take. So when I put alcohol in my body, I have little control over how much I'm going to keep putting in my body. That's because of the physical allergy, because it activates something. It says then you are probably alcoholic. In that case, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. So the distinction they're telling me there is I have to either have a mental obsession or a physical allergy. I've got both because I'm a double winner. So if you find yourself connecting with that, or you already know you're an alcoholic, for me, the only thing I can offer is you have to find someone to take you through the book and the steps, or else you're not going to make it. I've been sober long enough to see this happen over and over and over again. This belief that you can just stay sober by just being around us or going to meetings, and attendance at meetings is not sufficient to stay sober.
So what about the folks that, you're talking about a spiritual solution, a spiritual experience through the steps that are found in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous? What about the folks that struggle with a higher power?
So normal. They said the first 100 men and women that wrote our book said half of their membership, which is 50 of the 100, struggle with the higher power. I did too. Even though I believed in a higher power, I did not feel safe and secure to turn my life and my will over to that higher power. I was afraid of what that was going to look like. So whether you believe or you don't believe, there's a chapter about we agnostics, and you want to work with someone who can help you walk through it. But I'll tell you what was told to me. What do you need from a higher power? If you could believe in a higher power and you understand that you can't be it, what is it that you need? And for me, when I was newly sober, I was like, I need courage. I'm terrified of doing everything without alcohol or drugs. I don't know how to show up for any of this. And so they said, why don't you have courage be your higher power? And we started where we were. And that is how it works. I've said to people, you can borrow my higher power. You can pray to whatever Carly believes in. What I can tell you today is that it's a journey, and it changes, as you guys know, and it will constantly develop. But if they can't even fathom that power, all they have to do is say to themselves, are you willing to be open to the possibility that it might be something down the road that you could believe in? It's all about saying, are you willing, right? And that's where you start.
So what I hear you saying is, because the question that I asked was, how do you start loving yourself? And I think what I heard you say is, if you're an alcoholic, and there's an easy to read and self-identify test in the big book, if you are, the only thing that's going to help you is getting a sponsor and working through the steps. So that's number one.
Yeah, you can't get to loving yourself. Yeah, you cannot get to loving yourself before you go through the steps. So the steps only talk about drinking in step 1, right? The rest of the steps are getting rid of that mental obsession, that mean, angry voice in our head that hates us. Is the exact opposite of what we're reading. And until for me, I talk about clearing our hallway out, that I've placed all the stuff in the hallway in between you and me because I need to feel safe, but actually it ends up blocking me off from God. Until I get rid of all that crap in the inventory steps in 4 through 9, and then I keep getting rid of it every single day in 10, 11, and reaching out in 12. Until I do that, there is don't even think about loving yourselves at this point. Just get to a place where you can survive. And then the next step is, how do I get to a place where I can be kind to myself? And it's baby steps. It's changing our vocabulary. It's when someone says, oh, you look nicely, you don't say, ugh, really? You say, thank you. Like, it's little teeny baby steps, and it can't start until you do the work.
I love that. Carly, I could talk with you for days.
Me too.
This is a great conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience before we wrap up?
The only way out is through, and there are no shortcuts.
Bam.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure. I love you guys.
This is great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for saying yes.
Thanks so much for listening. If you want to find us online, you can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Daily Reflection Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Daily Reflector. You can read stories of recovery from our community at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. Please don't forget to give us a rating on your podcast app. We greatly appreciate it. Have a great day. This podcast produced by Lee McGinnis and Michael Lynn. Editing services by Jeff Bain.